It feels like they're testing things, right? Because we did a pandemic. Now we know how that works. We know how easy it is to scare people. And so, the cyber attack or the major outage is on that list of things they want to understand before they actually launch it for real. And so this could have been just a trial run. Hey, what happens if we shut the internet down for 3 hours?
Sounds
Let's
like
see.
fun.
Yeah, let's just make sure that it's okay for us.
The Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. John Rubino is back with us. John, you've been on the road, but you're looking healthy, and that's the important thing. So, hey, the first question, World War III, are we there yet?
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, it's good to be back home and good to talk to you after a month of traveling around. And I guess you're going to hit the road pretty soon too yourself.
Yep.
So yeah, well, have fun if we don't talk before that. But yeah, World War III. That might be an important story going forward, and it trumps all the finance stuff that we're going to talk about. Because if we're in a shooting war with nuclear powers, then it really doesn't matter what the treasury yield is or where the NASDAQ is or Nvidia's price, because we're in danger of nuclear annihilation at that point. Well, anyhow, we're getting closer and closer. First, in Ukraine, we've been feeding so many weapons and probably so many advisors and on-the-ground people to this proxy war over there, which was originally designed to weaken Russia, take an adversary off the chessboard. And it's been going on forever, and Russia's not off the chessboard, and the Ukrainians are basically out of people. So they're starting to do something desperate now, or the Ukrainians and the US in partnership are starting to do something desperate where they're attacking the interior of Russia. And they're hitting nuclear plants and refineries and military bases. And so Russia is kind of, they're at the point where, okay, this is it. They're just going to invade Ukraine completely, take it over, and just basically crush anything that gets in their way. The problem with that is that the US is in the way now. We've sent them planes, and so has NATO. There are German planes and US planes over there. There are trainers showing those guys how to fly the planes, and apparently there are US soldiers embedded with the Ukrainians who are in Russia now, attacking Russia assets. Yeah.
We learned so much from Vietnam, John?
Yeah. Well, that was a long time ago, Kerry. It's easy to forget in 3 decades how you almost ruined your culture. But so we're reaching the point now where Russians and Americans are going to be killing each other and blowing up each other's stuff. And boy, that is so close to an actual declared shooting war with the 2 biggest nuclear powers in the world, and so that's one thing. And then meanwhile, you got Israel sinking more and more deeply into a broad Middle Eastern war, and the US bringing over assets to protect Israel against Iran. And so, Iran is not a nuclear power, but it's a major Middle Eastern power. And who knows, it might at this point be a nuclear power. We don't know what the state of their nuclear program is. So, but we do know that they've got a lot of cruise missiles, they've got a lot of people, they've got a lot of weaponry for that theater. So that's, I don't know if you could call that World War III, but you could certainly call it a major broad-based Middle Eastern war that the US is on the verge of involving itself in. And then, of course, you've got China over there, where we've got China surrounded by military bases. And one little accident with an aircraft carrier or a fighter jet or something like that could set things off over there. So we're in grave danger of a 3-front war right now, 2 fronts of which involve nuclear powers, at least 2 fronts of which. So this is a nightmare, and it's all our fault. We didn't have to surround China with military bases. There's a funny meme that I posted on my Substack that is a picture. Well, first of all, the headline is "Iran wants a war." And then you scroll down and it's a map of Iran with all of our military bases and around it. And the caption is, because why else would they have surrounded all our military bases with their country? Yeah. So that's the situation out there. We're
I
picking
love
fights
it.
with everybody, and it could end, well, it could end pretty badly for humanity, or at least very badly for the cultures that are involved in this war. So, here's hoping that we get to the brink and we pull back. But
Hey,
in the meantime, until we do pull back, there's no other story that even comes close to the magnitude and the importance of World War III.
so really the election is the only other story, because one side we know wants to have World War III and blow up everybody, I guess, real and imagined enemies. It's like that song from the 70s by Randy Newman. Let's drop the big one now. They all hate us anyhow, so let's drop the big one now. It's like somebody grew up with that song. And then there's Trump, which, according to Tucker Carlson, Trump's major sin for the military industrial complex, the neocons, is that he didn't want another war.
Well,
So
yeah,
imagine that.
that's the main reason why he's hated by the establishment, because he's getting in the way of their gravy train. Because the way the military industrial complex works now is that politicians go out there and decide who to invade or which proxy war to finance or whatever. And of course, they send a bunch of money. That money flows back to General Dynamics and Raytheon for new weapons. And then they pay their CEOs massive year-end bonuses. But with a little bit of the money that's left, they funnel it back into those same politicians' re-election campaigns. So it's a nice closed system in which everybody gets rich, except for the people that are murdered by the proxy wars and the nuclear conflagrations that are going to engulf our kids if it goes much further. So yeah, you don't want a politician getting in the way of that, because it's billions, hundreds of billions of dollars
Brilliance.
at stake. Yeah, yeah. Over time, it's trillions. Yeah. So, I don't. Trump is too erratic for me to come out in support of. But we had 4 years of him. We had 4 years of Biden. The Trump years were much more peaceful than the
All
Biden years. As soon
wars.
as Biden got into office, he started every kind of war you can imagine out there. And that was because he is in the pocket of the defense establishment, and the Democrats in Congress, and the Republicans too. I mean, all of the political class
Yeah.
is basically in the pocket of big pharma, big food, the military industrial complex, and the green energy establishment. So anybody who gets in the way of that is risking their life, and we're seeing that with Trump right now. So I think it escalates from here. They missed with the one assassination attempt, and they will come back with more
We come
legal
back for
stuff.
more, you think?
Yeah. Yes. Well, yeah, I think so. And who was the guy? One of the big Democratic politicians just he was on camera and he said, well, if Trump gets elected, if he wins the election, then we're going to have to prevent him from being able to take office using
Ratkin.
this. Yeah, yeah. And was it the 25th
Jamie
Amendment?
Ratkin.
I don't remember what the legal mechanism they were going to use was, but he just flat out said that they were going to use it. So
They won't confirm him. But that would be
yeah.
anarchy, because then it would really be a constitutional crisis, because Trump would not ascend to the presidency if he was elected, right? But the statutory terms of Biden or whoever is running things there and the cackler would be over. So we would literally have nobody as president.
Well, we would have a civil war is what we would have, And
that's
that might distract us from World War III. So in the end, a U.S. civil war might actually kill fewer people. So I don't know. I'm in Washington State. That's the wrong state to be in for a civil war in the United States, But
I'm sorry.
we'll see.
It's not funny, but I can't help but laughing. Why is that, John? I mean, hey, it's serious. We're talking the end of the world, the end of the living as we know it, and I'm finding humor in it.
Well, because it's so stupid. This is just so improbable. and so inexplicable that you kind of have to laugh. I mean, this is just batshit crazy what we're doing right now. And well, I mean, it used to be easier to laugh about financial crises because they are pretty funny. They're tough for a lot of people to get through, but it's just stupid Wall Street people taking unnecessary
Games.
risks and government bailing them all out. And if you play it right, you get rich too. But World War III, there are very few ways to come out of that better than you went into it, right? I mean, a few
Yeah.
people will, but it's not a broad-based thesis that you can use to just, okay, well, I'll implement this kind of prepping and I'll be fine, because you can't. So anyhow, yeah, all you can do is laugh sometimes.
Yeah, well, what else are you gonna do? But it really is escalating. Now, I don't know about China, because China is like had some huge issues with flooding. They had like 1,000-year floods that just washed away whole provinces. It was the most amazing thing to watch. And it seems like Xi is fighting to hold power. Um, it's just making for a very unstable situation globally. It's making me believe that maybe the stars are behind it here. I mean, there is a guy who, June 1st, he's a uh, Ayudic astrologer. That he does Indian astrology, and he said between July 4th and 11th there would be an assassination, a political assassination. And 2 days later, they tried to take out Trump, and by all rights, Trump should have been gone. That was like a shot that you just don't miss. And then he said a terrorist attack. Well, they're saying it wasn't, but the whole crowd strike thing that shut down, broke the internet throughout the world. I mean, John, at my gym, the TVs had the blue screen of death because they were all hooked into servers and stuff, and they just shut down. It was the most amazing thing. Like every other TV was shut down. I mean, that was a big deal. Literally, the internet broke. And if it had lasted for any amount of time, we would have a major economic depression. Imagine airlines not being able to fly for weeks. They couldn't fly for hours, and it cost them billions. It would have cost them tens of billions, because under the law, the airlines got to make good. If there's a computer crash, and it's not an act of God, they got to make good on all those tickets.
Yeah. Well, it feels like they're testing things, right? Because we did a pandemic. Now we know how that works. We know how easy it is to scare people. And so, the cyber attack or the major outage is on that list of things they want to understand before they actually launch it for real. And so this could have been just a trial run. Hey, what happens if we shut the internet down for 3 hours?
Sounds
Let's
like
see.
fun.
Yeah, let's just make sure that it's okay for us. And I think that the people who did that now know a lot more about what happens when you shut the internet down for a while. So yeah. And there's no reason that these things can't happen all at once. A declaration of World War III, an internet outage, and another pandemic.
Well, we better
Anyhow,
get Fauci. Got to get Fauci. Where's Fauci when you need him,
bring
John?
back Fauci. Yeah, that's right. He's retired, but he can come back. But yeah, so Kerry, you and I are veering off into tinfoil hat here territory. Can you keep all this stuff on YouTube, or
Yeah, I think so.
you
It's
have to
like it's
edit?
almost like anything goes now.
Sweet.
We didn't
Yeah.
say anything too bad, but hey, it's you got to kind of speak in try a little code or pig Latin if you're not sure.
Well, now that we're heading back into an election, it's probably going to get tighter again because their people were in charge, so they
Okay.
didn't really feel that threatened. But you seeing what's happened in Britain now
Yeah.
with
So yeah,
there's a guy going to prison
for me,
for posting memes. Yeah, for memes, and they weren't even explicitly
they weren't
calls for
even good.
violence or anything. They were just I forget what it was, but something like, "This is what happens with open borders," and it was a funny scene of protests or riots or something, but put him in prison for it. So, and then they were threatening to extradite Americans for stuff we did here in our internet.
Well, did you catch? So yesterday, and I should mention it's August 13th, yesterday, Trump sits down with Musk. But before that happened, like 2 hours before, some honcho from the EU sent Musk a letter saying, you can't do this. You're putting out disinformation. Disinformation's illegal, blah, blah, blah. And Musk posted it. And the thing went on. And then again, funny thing happened, a denial of service attack. It tied it up, but they still, with all the reposts and everything else, John, they've gotten over 1 billion views, which is a record, and is sending the powers that be into absolute conniption fits.
Well, yeah, because they do not, well, obviously they don't want Trump to win. And they've got a list of options there. And, shutting him down on public forums is one of their options. That's not a guarantee of anything, but it makes it harder for him to do what he does. He hasn't had any big outside rallies, has he, since or not very many, since the assassination attempt. And if it was because, but he was having them, one after another. And that's his big way of reaching his people. So, I mean, if the lower number of outside venues is because it's so much more complicated and dangerous to do them now, then that assassination attempt partially succeeded. So, I don't know. There's a lot of things that can be tried between now and then. And you know what else is interesting is this is the first ever election where AI generated content is a controversy, like those Kamala Harris
They were great.
crowd scenes.
They were so good, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, some people are saying, well, they're fake. And then I've caught a couple of mainstream outlets saying, oh, yeah, and the Republicans tried to say that these totally legit images were fake. And so I don't know, obviously, whether they were fake or not, but it's now a source of uncertainty, right? Whatever you see, you can think, well, is this real or is it AI generated? So it wouldn't be a surprise if we get some big false flags heading up into the election where they use AI generated imagery to make some kind of a point, to discredit somebody or to make somebody look extra good or whatever. And there isn't enough time left till the election to completely debunk it. So it stands as real video or real audio. And this is the first election where that's ever been a thing. So that's a huge deal if it's true.
So true. Hey, it's one of those things, but you got to wonder what you're seeing, because they had one of Kamala Harris saying stuff that was stupid, but it wasn't that much more stupid than what she usually says. So it's almost like believable. But
well,
hey,
with her, and this same is true as Trump
yeah,
is you don't need to make up fake stuff with them. You could just go through their video background and pull out all kinds of things that in a 30-second commercial are pretty damning, so we'll see a lot of that to be in the next month. Yeah, cheap
fakes, as she called it, which nobody had ever heard of.
But they're not fake. That's a way of dismissing them. But if it's real video footage, then it's a real thing and it's a completely legitimate thing to post. The thing is, we won't know for sure whether it's real or fake right away. And we might not have time to actually do the analysis that we need to do, or it might never show up. Like if you're in either of the big media silos, you will never know if something is whatever, if something is real or fake, because they won't tell you unless it's in their interest to tell you. So if you're on Fox or MSNBC, you're only going to get the stuff that reinforces your preconceptions. And so you're going to think those videos are real, or you're going to know they're false, depending on how it plays in your silo. So this is very scary stuff.
And you can't believe what they say anyway, because they said Hunter Biden's laptop was fake. And that didn't wear too well, did it?
No, but half the country still believes what CNN and MSNBC was saying back then.
Because it's the most
And
trusted source of news, right?
yeah, and but I don't want to make this any more partisan than it is, because
No, no.
there's another group of people who watch Fox, and they still think that the lies that we're told on Fox are true, because nobody's disabused them of that notion. So yeah, it's possible to build your own little media ecosystem that features people who are trustworthy. And that's what people are doing that. They're migrating over to Tucker Carlson
Yeah.
and Joe Rogan, and realistically, a lot of people on the left too, who honestly believe what they're saying. Okay. It doesn't mean any of those guys are right on any given issue,
Hmm.
but it means that they're honestly trying to figure out what's true. And they're honestly trying to take that truth that they feel like they've discovered and give it to people. And so you build a media system like that, a media ecosystem like that, and you have a way healthier view of the world, because you're getting at least what some people honestly believe is the truth. And that's better than just flat out lies because it fits a narrative, which is
Hmm.
what most people get right now.
Hey, wasn't it Abraham Lincoln who said, you can gaslight some of the people some of the time, you can gaslight all of the people some of the time, but you can't gaslight all of the people all of the time? Wasn't that Lincoln that said
That
that?
could be. I think it's P.T. Barnum who was, uh,
Yeah,
but it
well,
could be Lincoln.
hey, like when they said the gaslight district in San Diego, I think the U.S. has become a gaslight district. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, in other news, well, we got producer prices barely rising. So convenient for an election, John. So I guess inflation is over. We don't have to worry about it anymore. The Fed fought the good fight and they won. And now, prices are higher, but they won't go much higher.
Well, we'll have favorable economic numbers going into the election, because we've had them for the last year. What they do with, for instance, the jobs number or whatever, is they report a beautiful number, take credit for it, and then revise it back to its much lower number, real number, over the ensuing months when nobody's paying attention.
Yeah.
Obviously, the same thing's going to happen with economic numbers going into the election. So we shouldn't trust them, other than for the fact that they're going to justify, those numbers will justify cutting interest rates. So there is going to be a real
Right.
world impact here, where
So,
we'll get
right.
lower interest rates, maybe like 3/4 of a point lower on the Fed funds rate by the time the election happens. And that'll have an impact, although, 3/4 of a point is not going to destroy the world or save the world. But probably, okay, here's the scenario that probably works out, is that the economy still looks reasonably good in early November. But after the election, the bad numbers are allowed to come out, and the natural momentum that we have, which is downward, really gets going. And we have a pretty serious recession in 2025, which causes the Fed to panic cut. And then we get back into where we were 3 or 4 years ago, when interest rates are close to zero, and um, inflation has been replaced by deflation as the big fear. We're liable to be back there this time next year. So question is, how are we going to invest for that kind of a sea change? And I'm not really sure, because it's not even necessarily that good for gold and silver early in that process. Cutting interest rates is good, but deflation fears are bad. So we'll have to see. This is going to be a tricky one to navigate, but it's going to be very different, which means different things make money for us in early 25 from what has made money in the past 3 or 4 years. So fascinating times, but we'll have a lot to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, the Gaslight Associates, they're now in charge of all the economic statistics. So we know we'll get the real story from them. But, we've been in a recession for years already. It just used to be 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, right? Which we had. And then they said, no, not a recession, right?
And remember, that's real GDP growth using the government's inflation numbers to adjust
which are wrong.
raw GDP. Yeah. So I think if we took actual inflation, which is probably 3 or 4 percentage points higher than the government's number, then we had negative growth for a year and a half there. Because remember, 2022, we had almost 9% official inflation. So 2022 had to be a down year in real terms, no matter what, right? And if you're adjusting nominal GDP for 9% inflation, you got to end up with a negative nominal GDP or real GDP number, but we didn't. So
yeah,
so I don't know.
My mother always used to tell me that statistics lie and liars use statistics. And then was it Winston Churchill who said there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics? So
yeah, and there are official statistics. That's the important thing, because the official ones are the ones who are so grossly manipulated in today's world.
Well, the only number you really can trust is the stock market, because it might be fakery, whatever, but at least when the stock market goes up, John, you know it went up, right?
Well, that's true. You know that the number is the number in the stock market,
right?
But why it goes up is a lot more complex and interesting, because, are governments behind the scenes buying equities, or when they keep interest rates at artificially low levels and that raises the price of financial assets like stocks, is that real? And I think it's not. I think financial assets have been artificially elevated for 30 or 40 years now. So when the revaluation to actual intrinsic value happens, it's going to be pretty brutal.
Look out.
Yeah, we need to be short, at least to an extent, somewhere, somehow. I'm gradually buying NASDAQ put options. And
out of the money, deeply out of the money?
No, slightly out of the money, but to minimize the premium to an extent, at least. And all of them are underwater right now, except for the most recent one. That's the only one that's up, and that's the way that works. When you kind of feather into a short position, the recent one makes you all the money, and that offsets the older ones that have lost so much that you can't get back to even on them.
Well, that's what's his name, Nassim Talabi's theory of black swan. Because you keep buying these out of the money puts, like you keep buying them and they keep expiring worthless until one day they're worth a ton of money. Or like Biederman. Do you remember Biederman? He was a metals guy like 15 years ago, kind of when I got started in this. And he said, silver is the worst asset in the world. It's horrible. No one in their right mind would buy it, except that one day you will wake up and silver will become the best performing asset in the world, and you'll be glad you had it. We're still waiting, but it looks like that day is getting closer, right?
Oh, absolutely. When the Fed starts panic cutting and interest rates get back down towards zero, then silver will outperform gold dramatically. So yeah, you got to own silver.
Okay, so we had a little mini crash. I don't really consider this a crash. I think it was hedge fund induced, trying to screw with the election, just what happened in 08 and 09 when the hedge funds drained out hundreds of billions of dollars from the money market funds. They collapse, cascading collapse, and then we had the great financial collapse. But there's a theory that the collapsing yen carry trade may have caused it. First, explain for me and for those of you listening, what is the carry trade, John?
Yeah, and I think it's the culprit this time around. So basically, the carry trade is a few years ago, Japan had incredibly low interest rates, like 0.5%. You could borrow yen at 0.5 percentage point. But the rest of the world had really low interest rates too. But then the US and Europe started raising their interest rates. And that created this really juicy spread where you could buy yen for 0.5% because Japan did not raise their rates. and then you invest that money in US Treasury bonds for 4.5%, and you make a 4% spread for basically just a couple of mouse clicks.
Risk-free.
Yeah. Well, people thought it was risk-free. But then Japan, by keeping their interest rates so low for so long, started to affect the value of the yen, and it started to plunge. Everybody else had high interest rates. Japan had low interest rates. It made the yen less attractive for certain groups to own. And so the yen started to fall in a disorderly way. Japan had to step in and prop up the yen. And that made, first of all, it made the yen go up versus the dollar, and it made Japanese interest rates go up. So it blew up the carry trade. All of a sudden, you're not paying that loan back in depreciated yen, you're paying it back in appreciated yen. In other words, that loan that you thought you were going to make 4 or 5% on is going to cost you 15 or 20%. And you did it with size. You did $100 million or whatever.
Billions.
If you're a hedge fund. Well, in the aggregate, it was $1 trillion or so, some analysts think. So you've got $1 trillion or so worth of carry trades blowing up out there. And that means that people are having to sell their stocks to come up with the margin calls on these things, and that affected all the financial assets out there. And that's what blew up the stock market just lately here, because you saw the Japanese stock market tank first, and for a few days it was falling by like 9% a day, trading day, and then the Nasdaq in the U.S. collapsed, and that pulled the rest of the U.S. stock market down. So it was, I think it's a safe bet that it was the yen carry trade blowing up that caused this problem. But the important thing is there is no fix. If you're Japan, yes, you can bring your currency back up. But to do that, you have to sell all your dollars to buy yen. And then your foreign exchange reserves are drained, and your government is still borrowing insane amounts of money. So then you have inflation, or you have a crash in currency, or you have a bankrupt government. You can't get out of this without a gigantic existential crisis. And that's what people are realizing right now, because maybe we stopped the carnage in the stock market, but we actually didn't fix any of the underlying problems.
Never do.
With the financial system. Yeah, so that's the crack up boom that we've got ahead of us at some point in the not too distant future. And this was like a little mini version of that, but it's going to be much bigger when it happens, because $1 trillion will be a rounding error when the actual crack up boom happens. So it'll be tens or more than that of trillions of dollars of financial assets all blowing up at once. So and that's if we avoid World War III, right?
Yeah.
Remember that.
We don't avoid World War III.
All these financial predictions are only if we survive in order to see them happen.
I think there's a stealth carry trade that we don't know anything about. And I think it involves options, and it involves buying Japanese government debt, bringing that over here, collateralizing it to buy US debt. And then you never have to go through the currency translations. You got a secured asset. You probably could, I don't know that the Fed will take it, but any bank will take it and basically give you US treasuries. And then you never had to go changing money or anything, I think there's a lot of ways it's been played that nobody knows about. And when it blew up not so much what we could see, but what we didn't see. And that's why, the Japanese, but somehow it just righted itself in 3 days, John. Isn't it amazing what we can do now?
Yeah, it's amazing what we can do in the short run. But and we shouldn't forget there are derivatives out there. There's going on $2 quadrillion face value of derivatives, some of which are interest rate sensitive, some of which are currency sensitive. So yeah, the ramifications of the stuff we can see are dwarfed by what happens to the stuff that we can't see until there's an announcement that JP Morgan Chase is going under because of their derivatives book, and the government is stepping in to bail them out. Then, derivatives. That's right. I remember that from 2008. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything until it means something. In the meantime, silver is trading at $27 the ounce, a little bit more, almost 28. gold, broke the 2,500 mark, I think, if I'm looking at the right app. And hey, we got merger activity now. Last subject. Miners, Newmont had blowout first quarter earnings. I almost bought some options on it like 3 weeks ago, but of course I didn't. Kick myself. It's trading at $49. It was at $42 3 weeks ago. And then Anglo Gold just bought a Cisco Mining, 65% premium, and everybody's a buzz about it. Just talked to junior mining company, one of the real quality issues out there, and they're like ecstatic because they just had a huge find, and now all of a sudden the majors are waking up from their stupor saying we need to start buying juniors because we don't have enough production for the future. We're going to be going under or dramatically contracting.
Yeah. Well, that's what you get when the thing you sell goes up in price, right? And that's what happened with gold. The price of gold in the second quarter of this year was about 17% higher than it was in the second quarter of 2023. So that gave the big gold miners a nice pop in revenues. A lot of that fell down to the bottom line. So it was either free cash flow or net earnings that went way, or both, that went way up. And what happens then, when big miners are seeing rising free cash flow, they initially help out their shareholders immediately with, dividend increases or share buybacks.
Yeah.
But then that cash flow is still coming. And so they start looking around and thinking, wow, I could build an empire. I could be bigger than this guy who I'm smaller than him now, but let me make just a couple of acquisitions. And I'll be the one not taking his calls, and so they start empire building and like you said, legitimately rebuilding their resource bases, and they do that by buying up the really good quality explorers and junior producers who are big enough to move the needle for a big company, and Osisco. That, as you mentioned, was bought out by Anglo Gold for a really nice premium, 60-some% one day to the next in that stock. And it's just a really good quality resource that Osisco has delineated. And that's not a company maker for somebody like Anglo, but it's a really good, they called it a bolt-on acquisition. You just add that to your other reserves, everything looks great. You don't miss a beat, and so there's a lot of small miners and explorers who aren't producing yet, but who found a lot of gold in the ground, who are, in the conversation of who's next after Osisco. Once people saw that kind of a premium, then they want to know who hasn't gone up yet, but who is capable of being bought out for that. And there's a bunch. So let a couple more deals like that happen. And the junior mining space will be a very exciting place to be. So again, here's hoping. That would be very cool because I own a lot of beaten up junior miners, that would be nice to see them just to get back to where I paid for them. But another 65% or 100% or whatever on top of that would still feel good in the short run.
Hey, and we should also mention that Newmont upped their dividend. Between Newmont and Barrick and Agnico, they're all giving a 2% yield now. So when a company like is already paying a dividend and they start getting all this excess cash flow, that they can't reinvest because there's only so many decent juniors out there, and they don't want to go so far out in the junior space that they're just basically speculating with the public, right? So they want to go for sure things. They're going to be upping their dividend. And if gold goes up $2,500, $3,000, a lot of that cash flow is going to find its way into dividends. You'll see them, yielding huge dividends again.
Yeah, that makes them good buys. But you know what? You can get those big stocks in one of the ETFs that own the big stocks in that space. There's Sprott has one, and then GDX is another one. You just buy that, and then you get Agnico Eagle and
it's true.
who do I want to say? Who's the GOLD, right? Oh, Barrick. You get Barrick, yeah, you get those guys. So it's
the big
you
three.
don't really have to analyze the big gold miners because first of all, it's really hard to do because they've got 10 different world-class mines spread out all over the world.
That's the
No
problem.
regular person can make sense of that. But so you just buy those stocks via a large gold miner ETF, and you're instantly exposed to them.
Yeah, and it has a lot of advantages buying ETFs. We won't get into that now. In any event, that is it for today. Hopefully, we'll catch up before I well, we definitely will. But make sure you go over to John's Substack, rubino.substack.com, our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Subscribe. And John, if you got any questions for John or myself, shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. John, we'll catch up to you in a few weeks.
Great, Kerry. Talk to you soon.